Good morning. Welcome to episode 78 of the Driller Newscast, a weekly update on the news and stories impacting the drilling and water industry. I'm your host, Brock Yordy, and this week we continue the discussion with Tanner Kuhl of the United States Ice Drilling Program, where we're going to discuss all the difficulties that are encountered while coring and drilling ice and getting to bottom so that we can get those rock cores recovered so we can better understand what our planet is doing currently for climate, what it was doing 500,000 years ago, and how climate change is impacting that. But before I jump into this great discussion, I want to talk about last week. I attended the National Drilling Association's 51st convention in Lexington, Kentucky. The event was a perfect blend of professional development, networking, and industry camaraderie. We ended every night in the hotel courtyard around these big fires, playing bags, laughing, talking about successes and failures, laughing at 90s rock, having some nostalgic moments. It was a great way to cut loose and professionally develop, and I suggest you go to next year's convention. On day 3 of the event, I caught up with the National Drilling Association's keynote speaker, Brian Brogan, and asked him to share some knowledge on the future of the construction industry. You know what was really cool about Brian? Although being very busy as an industry advocate, author, professional, promoting this industry, consultant, I bumped into him several times at rig demonstrations and CEU classes without knowing he was our keynote speaker. Brian was there to learn. And this is big because our construction industry is 7.9 million professionals. However, when we drill down into it, less than 20,000 of those professionals are drillers. So we're a very important, vital part. And Brian knew that. So I'd like to introduce you to the discussion we had. I hope you enjoy.
I am Brian Brogan. I have spent almost 30 years in the construction industry, from a laborer all the way up to a vice president. And today I speak and train on leadership, communication, and safety. So have a lot of fun traveling the country doing that.
So I'm going to call an audible here. Leadership, safety, and communication. How do those tie together with this generation that we have coming in?
That's a great question. Yeah, so for me, what I am learning about this new generation, hey, they are creative. They have a lot of great ideas. They have grown up in this technology environment, and that they bring a lot to the table. But one of the things I think that they need to be encouraged about is professionalism. How can you be a construction professional? Thoughts and ideas are great. How do we put them to practice? Those type of things. So I think there's a lot of great potential future. And I think it's a combination of us senior people helping them and bringing them along. Brock, the same way people brought us along.
Yeah. So you go to high schools, and I heard you say, I think you said 16 weeks a year you're in high school engaging. What age do you think we should be engaging with this industry if we want to inspire them? My 5-year-old son is going to be a water well driller or Tom Brady. That's what he's told me. So how do we get them inspired?
Well, Brock, my motivation was I was a troubled youth. High school was tough for me. I didn't like it. I didn't like school. But when I realized how important school was to my career, I decided, you know what? I want to go encourage these young people, make them tie industry to education. Why do you need to know this? That's the important part. And so that's why we did that. Been doing it for the last 10 years. We teach these students about safety, job safety analysis. So we do a project. So what we do, it's a virtual project, and they go through job safety analysis, schedule, cost, and then they have to deliver a PowerPoint and do that in front of 150 guests on the banquet night. And one of our volunteers told us, she said, when we go to these presentations, we do it in front of a panel of about 5 people as the owners. These students are doing this in front of their parents, industry, other teachers, and all the other students and their parents. So it's overwhelming, but they learn these presentation skills that, man, I wish I would have learned in high school.
That is great. Thank you for your time today.
Thanks, Brock. Nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Our feature this week is part 2 of our interview with Tanner Kuhl. where we drill into the technical aspects of drilling in Greenland to retrieve invaluable scientific data for climate change. Why is this research important? I want you to go back and listen to episode 74 of the Driller Newscast, where we talk about net zero and why, as a global community, we came together and attempted to try to maintain a 1.5 degrees Celsius rise in temperature. However, we've missed that mark and we're on our way to 2 and past. And as I have that discussion, you see where the higher we get beyond 2 degrees Celsius, how more the polar ice caps diminish, how often. Right now, Antarctica is losing ice mass at an average rate of about 150 billion tons per year. And Greenland is losing about 270 billion tons per year, adding to the sea level rise. The ice sheets of Greenland and Antarctica store about 2/3 of all the fresh water on Earth. They're losing ice due to the ongoing warming of the Earth's surface and ocean. And yes, we can have the discussion that that is supposed to happen, or if it's being caused by climate change. We can see that we're having an impact to our planet due to carbon emissions. And this is the goal of net zero. Meltwater coming from these ice sheets is responsible for about 1/3 of the global average rise in sea level since 1993. We just saw the island nations come together and speak with the UN about the impact of climate change, coastal erosion, extreme weather, how this is impacting them. And they're not the big carbon emitting producers. Last week was Climate Week in New York City, and a lot of this discussion was happening. The data being studied from these ice cores recognizes that 400,000 years ago, the Greenland glaciers were fully melted. This is a revolutionary thought. In July, the Journal of Science says a large portion of Greenland became a ice-free tundra roughly 400,000 years ago. They calculate that the melting caused at least 5 feet of sea level rise, and maybe as much as 20 feet, at a time when temperatures were only slightly warmer than today, even though atmospheric levels of heat-trapping carbon dioxide were far lower. This indicates that Greenland is one of the more sensitive ice sheets to human-caused climate change than previously understood, and could be vulnerable to irreversible rapid melting in coming centuries. The Department of Defense recognizes sea level rise and climate change as a military readiness issue. We see this across the world right now, from water crisis issues to flooding to coastal erosion, and it's man-made. Let's jump into this discussion with Tanner to learn how we can retrieve these ice cores, the problems they encountered, and why it's so important. I hope you enjoy.
So you had told us a little bit already about this ASIC drill you used, and you'd used it before, but like from a drill perspective, did you see any challenges on this project that you didn't see in previous times that you'd used it?
Yeah, I mean every season's different. Ice is funny stuff. It varies based on how it was formed. You know, the temperatures. It's sort of stress history. So the ice in one location can drill completely different from ice in another location. So in previous experience, we sort of established a pumping pressure threshold that we thought was safe for the ice, that wouldn't crack it, wouldn't cause a hydrofracture in the ice. In a previous project, we'd actually had a hydrofracture that occurred on our first attempt to drill in Antarctica, and weren't able to recover from that one. Had to actually move the whole drill system to a new location before we were ultimately successful. Mm-hmm. But this season, in these upper porous snow layers, it's called fern. There was a lot of melt layers, which is a lot more common in Greenland than it is in Antarctica. So you'll be drilling through this fern, and it'll sort of alternate between sort of porous, snow-looking layers, and then really dense ice layers, which are the melt layers. So that's in the in the summertime, it can actually get above freezing on the surface, and the upper surface will melt, and then it'll sort of percolate into the rest of the snow and then freeze into a solid ice layer. So anyway, we had lots of these as we went down this last season, kind of unexpectedly, all the way down to 75 meters. We were still hitting these thick melt layers. And so we theorized, we did have a hydrofracture this season. It was at least 100 psi lower than I would have figured. We would have needed to start worrying about hydrofracture. And so we figured that we're theorized that it's likely to do with these melt layers actually cause the ice to be less strong than anticipated. Right at the packer, actually at the casing packer. So yeah, it can be different from site to site for sure. Mm-hmm. So yeah, and then just your normal mechanical issues that always spring up, fuel pumps dying, or hydraulic pumps that you need to replace, or there's these mineral exploration rigs are pretty complicated hydraulic machinery. Yeah. That's not really our wheelhouse. We have mostly done, it's sort of electromechanical drilling. Mm-hmm. So learning to be hydraulic mechanics little by little, fixing hydraulic cartridges and diagnosing stuff, as it comes up.
So we've talked about the difference of drilling ice versus a competent rock, and you got into the fact that once you got to the rock, the drilling was less than a day. If I could circle back on, these drilling operations, is there any time where you end up encountering rock or anything in the ice that shouldn't have been there? Discovering the unknown is always wild, and these things move, and we know 14,000 years ago they moved a lot of debris and stuff. What else have you encountered when you should just be coring ice?
Yeah, and this is an X-Files episode, isn't it?
Yeah, that does happen. Not the X-Files stuff yet, but so you can encounter rocks up in the upper surface. There can be windblown material, so it can be sand and small rocks that you drill through, and that's it's not really a problem with this drill. But with traditional ice coring drills, a rock will stop the whole project. Those drills do not tolerate anything but essentially clean ice. We've drilled many projects in sort of dirty ice. So various mountains, especially mountain glaciers, they'll have a lot of rock entrained in the ice. So you'll be drilling through pure ice layers, and then you'll get into a layer that has sand in with the ice, and then you'll get into there'll be small cobbles, or you might drill through part of a rock that's off to the side of the borehole. And we have machinery that can do that. A variety of different drills that we've used to do that in the past. It can be very frustrating. You brought up the heat issue earlier. Drilling rock surrounded by ice that's a problem. So especially if you're trying to do it dry, which in the past we had to for environmental reasons in certain areas, they wouldn't let you use drilling fluids. And that's extremely difficult to do, and you're only kind of marginally successful. But with these fluid circulation drills, you can generally keep things cold enough by circulating plenty of cold fluid past that to keep from melting the ice.
So let's swing it back a little bit to this project in particular. So the goal was to hit about 1,600 feet, right?
Well, we work in meters, so 500 meters, but yeah, that's approximately right.
Okay. And so you get about 80% of the way there, and you have a blowout at about 250 feet. Now you've been drilling for weeks at this point, right? What goes through your head when you hit a lost circulation zone on such a high stakes project?
Well, you say a lot of bad words, and so yeah, initially it's demoralizing, because at that point in the season we didn't have time to move. We knew that this borehole was our one shot, because it would have taken us at least a week and a half to move the rig, and then you have to go through all those processes of re-drilling the pilot hole and recasing and everything. So luckily we were able to diagnose that in this situation the hydrofracture had occurred right below the packer. Mm-hmm. So we were drilling in reverse circulation, so that makes sense. The highest pressure in the system is right below the packer. The highest pressure that the ice sees is right below the packer. So we had a video camera we were able to use. We actually got video of the crack. They actually showed in that Washington Post article that I think you guys have read. So what we were able to do is to pull the casing in the packer out, and of course pull the drill string out first, and then pull that out, and then we put back down our pilot hole drill, and we basically drilled the pilot hole deeper, trying to get below that fracture. We were aiming to get 15 meters below it, but as happens with this kind of drilling, the new pilot hole started to deviate quite quickly from the existing hole. So we were only able to drill about 4.5 meters deeper before we had to stop, or we would have lost the existing hole without enough time to drill another hole, from that depth. So anyway, so we took a chance, put the packer back down. And then at that point, we decided that we could only drill in normal circulation from that point on, to try to keep, that compromised area of the ice sheet to put the least amount of pumping pressure on that area of the ice sheet. And so without a lot of hope that it would actually work, we just started drilling again. And first time we'd actually really drilled with this full face ice bit in normal circulation in the ice. Normally we're only in normal circ when we're coring.
Yeah.
We're in reverse circ mostly to keep the ice chips, coming off the bit up inside the drill rod, and not have them out in that annular space where they can clog and cause issues. But we didn't have any choice in this case, so we just went for it. We had some bit trouble. Our bit that works really well in reverse circulation turned out to not work well in normal circ. Yeah. But luckily we had a whole box full of bits. So we tried some other stuff and eventually found a full phase PDC bit that had the correct porting on it for forward circ and or normal circ, and it worked great. So we had 2.5 days left, and we were able to drill that. We had 2 50+ meter days, and then we were at bedrock, and then we had one extremely long day pouring the sediment and the bedrock, and then we were done. And then next day we were supposed to get on a plane, but as it happens, the weather moved in, so we were there for a while, waiting out bad weather and disassembling things. But yeah, kind of last minute, everything came together.
So flipping from reverse back to, direct, solids are coming back up the annulus. Do you believe any of the solids were finding that fracture point? Do you think you band-aided it off a little bit? Did you maintain circulation?
Yeah, we did. So ice is funny. It doesn't just, crack a little bit. It cracks completely. So once you establish a crack, you can't pump against it because it takes almost no additional force to make that crack bigger. Okay. So the crack's kind of perfectly elastic, which is, it's kind of interesting because so meaning that you can pump as much drilling fluid as you want against it, and that crack's just going to keep getting bigger forever and ever and ever. You'll never pump against it. Yeah. But the interesting thing is you can start bailing fluid out of the hole, and as you remove that head pressure from the crack, it closes and squeezes all that fluid back into your borehole. So you can actually get all your fluid back as long as you're just in a crack in the glacier itself. Yeah. Now, if you crack into, like a subglacial cavern or something, then that doesn't apply, and then your fluid's gone. But in this case, the crack was well up in the ice sheet near the top, upper bits of the ice sheet, and so we know that we sealed off below the crack because we wouldn't have been able to pump. We wouldn't have been able to establish circulation. So in this case, it's pretty easy to tell that you're sealed off.
I think every one of our listeners, lost circulation is one of those things that is is it from equivalent circulating density? Did we do it? Is it a VUG? Is it a void? From the lower Floridian all the way up into the Pacific Northwest, we all have those wells from hex stories, right? That, and now you're talking about it from ice. So it just fascinates me. I know the guys out there are going to love hearing about this.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, if you're out on an ice sheet, you're not dealing with crevassed areas where there's, there's open fractures. Just kind of the nature of ice. It's under such pressure that it's not going to have any cavities in it. It can't, kind of fundamentally can't in those regions. It completely depends on how the ice is stressed. So you get to sites where the ice is flowing and moving and going over, topography, then you get those crevasses, and then that's a different ballgame. We've got a driller who's had way too much experience losing circulation into crevasses and things that weren't, that didn't expect to be there. But in this case, it's not such a problem. We did on a previous project have the hydrofracture occur while we were coring. And so it was at the bottom of the hole. And in that case, there's no recovering from it. That's where you have to pick up and move, because you can't, there's no products that'll seal that crack off. It responds, like I said, perfectly elastically to pressure.
Wow. Once you get through the ice, how long does it take to do a core run? From 500 meters.
So I think we were about hour and a half, hour 45 per meter and a half coring run. We were just using 1.5 meter core barrel. Generally, we have 3 meter tooling, but we don't generally use it. It's hard to get it to fill up anyway. It's more of a pain to work with. But given that the requirements for the amount of subglacial material they want are so low, five drilling runs and we were done. Yeah. So that took a long shift to get that done.
Yeah. So you had talked a little bit about the drilling fluid. That's Isopar. Is that the name that I recall from the Washington Post story?
Yeah. The trade name is you use Isopar K. There's various different isopars out there, different densities. Yeah. But yeah, it's a commonly available product. We just buy it in drums from a chemical distributor out in New Jersey.
Yeah.
It's
I imagine like a lot of like everything else, you have to take all of it up there, like every stitch of everything you need.
Oh yeah,
to take up there.
Yeah, everything you need, other than drinking water is the only thing that's there. We melt snow for drinking water. Everything else we have to bring. Yeah. So that includes all your diesel fuel and everything.
Yeah. Now that's product. Like how's care and handling for that? Like we have a lot of water well and geothermal folks that may not, be fully familiar with oil and gas and all of that. So tell me a little bit about that. What's the handling like for that? And are you bringing it all back out as well, I imagine?
Yeah, we bring out as much of it as we can. You always leave a bit of a residue, but we do bail the hole at the end of the project. We've got fluid swabs and fluid bailers, so we get as much of it out as we can, because we can reuse it too, and it's not cheap. So we try to be as environmentally conscientious as we can, and plus we want it back to use on the next hole. But working with it's pretty decent to work with. It is hazardous shipping, so there is that side of it. You got to deal with the haz shipping side of it, but it's at the temperatures we work with, it's basically non-flammable. We've done tests trying to aerosolize it and light it on fire, and it doesn't want to burn. But that being said, we use explosion-proof drum pumps. We treat it like a flammable liquid, just in case. We've got personal protective equipment for all of our people. We use the really high-end Baffin industrial polar boots, drilling suits, insulated drilling suits to keep the chemical off people, chemical gloves, safety glasses, all that stuff. It you get it on you, as long as you get it off your skin fairly quickly, it's fine. If you let it sit on your skin for too long, it'll take that top layer of skin off. Yeah. It's like having gasoline or paint stripper or something on your hand too long. Yeah. But yeah, it's pretty, and like I said, it's nicer to work with than diesel fuel. It's pretty, compared to some of the other drilling fluids we use for deep ice core drilling, it's actually quite nice to work with.
So you're in Montana right now. What's the next project? Is there anything you can talk about? Is there an asteroid coming? You going up with NASA to blow up an asteroid?
No, NASA hasn't contacted us yet. Although I think it'd be easier to teach an astronaut how to drill than to teach a driller how to be an astronaut. But it doesn't make as good a movie, I guess.
I use that quote all the time.
This is, it's like twins here. It's odd.
Yeah, so the next project, we're tooling up for Antarctica work because we drill in the austral summer down there when it's wintertime up here. So we've got I don't know, a handful of projects, 4 or 5 projects that we've sent equipment for. That's on its way down there, probably on the ship already, headed down towards McMurdo Station. So the project I'm going to be on specifically uses a compressed air powered drill. So a couple very large air compressors running through through basically a hose with a cutting head on the end of it. And so we use that to make holes down to about 50 meters really, really fast. You make a 50-meter hole in about 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And just an empty hole. And then the scientists come behind us and fill them full of explosives and put their instruments out and do seismic shots. Basically, they're mapping the subglacial topography underneath some of these really worrisome glaciers out in West Antarctica that are speeding up and outletting into the ocean at an increasing rate. So there's a big international push out in that region of Antarctica to try to figure out exactly what's going on and how fast that ice actually might be going away also. But then we've got a couple traditional ice coring projects. One of our people is going to be going out on the Korean research icebreaker ship to do kind of a partial sail around the continent, and then they're going to put in a drill by helicopter and take a core if all goes as well as they hope. And then we're planning for some deep projects. The U.S. hasn't done a deep coring project for some time now, and the next one's going to start happening in the next couple of years. So that drill is the final touches are being put on that drill, and it'll be a 3,000 meter deep capable ice coring drill, similar to what we've used in the past, but some changes. So lots of projects coming up. This post COVID, COVID kind of threw a wrench into these programs for a couple of years, and so there's a lot of projects backed up that didn't get to happen. So there's no shortage of ice drilling that needs to be done now.
It's wild. I talk a lot about, drilling is what progresses our civilization. I believe drilling gets a bad rap too often on many aspects, but nothing's happening without a geotechnical investigation or an environmental investigation or water, or now, ground source geothermal or hot rock geothermal that we're doing for our energy grids, and here you are with colleagues researching what's happening and how we also need to be cognizant. Like drilling is now helping identify and say, this is how we're going to save our planet. This is some important stuff. It's very cool. How do you recruit? How do you bring in that next generation?
Yeah, it's mostly word of mouth, honestly. That's how I got hired. I was just walking down the road in Montana one day and met the neighbor, and she and her husband had been working in the Antarctic program for years, and she'd been doing some of this drilling. So you just kind of fall into it in some cases. We've been lucky to get some really good students out of the University of Wisconsin, some young guys that are young and strong, have good engineering skills, but also are good in the field. Helps to not be married with a bunch of kids if you're going to be gone for 2 or 3 months at a time. So we've had really good luck getting the young people involved right out of engineering school. And then so we just hire people that we know in the program, or someone that you might meet at the bar and say, hey, we need someone that doesn't get cold and doesn't mind lifting drill rod all day. And that's literally what we did this last season, and it worked out great. So we get people that send us emails that have heard about us. So we maintain a list of people that have expressed interest when we have projects coming up. There isn't a lot of people out there that have ice drilling experience. So we mostly just try to hire good people and we teach them how to do it.
Okay. So that kind of dovetails here with our final question. So here at the Driller, we're big on training up young people for work and drilling at all levels. And so give us some advice for folks that are just starting out or thinking about drilling or even engineering, as you are, as a profession. What advice do you have for young folks?
Yeah, I'd always encourage people to go into engineering if they have any sort of aptitude for it or interest in it. It's you can do just about anything with an engineering degree once you have it. So you can almost always get a good job, even if it's not in engineering. There's a lot of engineers that don't actually work in engineering, but just having that ability, opens doors for you. Specific to what we do, we need people to be able to take care of themselves in remote environments. So not only being having the technical skills, which are very important, but you also have to, we hire a lot of people out of various outdoor programs, people who have been guides, mountaineers, that kind of stuff. There's a lot of NOLs and outward bound instructors and things that find their way into the program. So having winter camping, mountaineering, skiing skills, that actually comes in fairly handy for what we do.
Yeah, I can imagine the survivalist part really helps, because if you're up on a glacier with people, like, your life is in the hands of the person at your right and at your left. So you have to, you really want to choose wisely.
Yeah. The last thing we need is to bring another problem with us. So we need people that know how to take care of themselves and can be, just as you say, can be useful in an emergency situation. So people with various medical training, we try to get them. People that have like wilderness first responder training or EMT training, that's really, really handy. But that being said, it doesn't mean you have to be an EMT to do this work. It's just nice to have the mix of skills.
Yeah.
I was working a project in the Atacama Desert with BHP and outside of Antofagasta, Chile. Actually, it may have been Rica. And we had to go through this extensive physical program before we could go work out there. And I was in my late 20s and a little bit heavier than I am now. And the doctor comes to me, and you had to do the test in Chile before you could go. He goes, "Sir, you can eat chili, but I don't really think you should be working in Chile." Anyway,
we have to do a similar quite comprehensive physical qualification program every year. It gets to be a bit of a pain after all these years, but they want to make sure that they're not sending people with known medical issues down there.
Great. Well, I think that just about wraps up the questions we have. I do thank you for your time, Tanner. This has been incredibly valuable, and it's such a great kind of program to learn about and kind of really hear some of the cutting edge of drilling out there. Pardon the pun.
Yeah, no problem. Happy to do it.
Yeah, thank you so much. This has been awesome. Thank you for joining us for episode 78 of the Driller Newscast. Thanks to Brian for sharing some knowledge with us. Thanks, Tanner. It was awesome to hear your successes, and keep on discovering the unknown in these extreme places so that we can better understand our planet and what we need to do to continue to keep in harmony with Mother Nature for all the generations to come. Check out thedriller.com. There's lots of great information coming out every day, the latest news, archived stories. Jeremy does a hell of a job there, keeping it all going. And at the end of this month, we have our second drill talk by Matrix Tooling. And this one, we jump into drilling problems using experience, sharing knowledge, questioning why, and why we understand that tooling to be tricky. I hope you enjoy. Thanks.